It's time for Mr.
Fundamental.
Presented by no one.
The New Orleans Pelicans had a pretty successful season last year, especially when you consider their poor start to the season, roster turnover, and missing Zion Williamson. Despite of these hardships, they were able to sneak into the playoffs and push the first-seeded Suns to 6 games. When you look at how this team could build off their success, the first answer is reintegrating Zion. But can they do that without jeopardizing what they did last season? Let's check it out. A quick recap on Zion. When he played in the 2021 season, Zion was an unstoppable force. He bullied defenses on a nightly basis and put up 27 points on 61% shooting from the floor. That is with a seldomly used shaky jumper and hitting below 70% of his free throws. Zion was at his best driving to the rim, whether it's being the roller after the screen, like getting this pocket pass from Ingram and floating it in for the finish, or doing it all by himself from the perimeter and being too big and too fast for his opponents. I'm sure the Pelicans want to build off their success from last season, so overhauling the whole system for Zion is probably out of the question. Even with Zion's superstar potential, it's quite hard to fit a skill set into a system with multiple high usage scorers in CJ, Ingram, and JV. Zion doesn't have the shooting to spread the floor off the ball, and needs to be part of the primary action to do damage. You also factor in his poor defense so far in his career. Reintegrating him might not be as straightforward, but we're mainly looking at the offense today. The funny thing is that the Pelicans might have actually prepared to reintegrate Zion back in last season. The most obvious adjustment is the increase in JV's 3-ball volume. He took a career-high 2.1 attempts per game and still maintained a success rate. 2 attempts isn't anything to call home about, but when you can go 7 of 8 in a game, teams will respect that threat. JV's threat as a shooter is going to help with keeping himself and Zion on the floor at the same time, allowing for a 4-out, 1-in offensive formation. The true inspiration of this video came about when I was wondering why the Pelicans weren't playing their 3-and-D rookie in Trey Murphy III. He was lighting up the summer league. The Pelicans' slow start made it seem like a good time for developmental reps, and their offense needed more spacing, like really needed it. Instead, they leaned on Herb Jones and Jackson Hayes. No disrespect since they both had a pretty good season, but they don't provide the shooting the Pelicans needed. After some thinking, something clicked. There were some reports saying Murphy wasn't up to par with his defense or consistency, but I think it's partly about reintegrating Zion as well. As I mentioned before, Zion isn't going to provide spacing based on his track record, so the Pelicans were getting used to it. I'm not sure if anyone else noticed, but the Pelicans were starting double centers in JV and Hayes in the back half of the season. Double center lineups are super rare in the NBA, even as JV and Hayes' improve ability to knock down long jumpers. It relies a lot on precise cutting to make it work. The Pelicans' offense already expect the primary action to be covered because the defense is willing to help off the limited shooters. Here is Kevin Love helping off Hayes. What the defense doesn't expect is that Hayes already cuts towards the basket and the pass gets him within range for the dunk. Again, the offense expects the defense to cover up the initial pick and roll. JV gets in a short roll and is met by Washington helping off Hayes. The inside position allows for a pass or a lob. A miss would be followed by a Hayes putback, or JV just straight up nails a short jumper. The Pelicans have been compensating for the lack of spacing with cuts and being active off the ball. On this drive by JV, it seems like the Cavs got everything covered up, until Hayes cuts behind the defense and Allen had to goaltend. With 3 poor floor spacers on the floor, the defense contains the primary action. Even on this Jones drive, he's met by 2 defenders in the paint. A timely cut lets Hayes catch the ball on the dotted line, and no one can stop the slam. By bringing 3 defenders above the arc, the impact of not having enough shooting is minimized by this double screen. Graham's defender is too high up because he was part of the initial action, and leaving only 1 weak side defender to tag the roller. Check out how Hayes is already sneaking up to the rim behind the defense, and the Pelicans take advantage of his vertical spacing. The Pelicans didn't trot out their double big lineup for the whole 48 minutes, but the spacing was just about the same when they replaced Hayes with Herb Jones. Again, Jones had a really good rookie season, but he was shooting below league average from deep on just over 2 attempts per game. Regardless, Jones was still doing damage by making timely cuts, and he's more comfortable putting the ball on the floor than Hayes. This time, he finds the open man for the corner triple. In semi-transition, the ball finds JV on the short roll. Green helps off of Jones because the threat of his jumper is much lower in the pecking order in this situation. A hard cut by Jones lets him catch the ball at the rim and lays it home. On this drive by Ingram, the defense rotates over and zones up the weak side. There doesn't seem to be any opening until Jones cuts hard to the rim and the defense has no time to react to this dunk. Essentially, what the Pelicans are doing is not settle for threes when the defense leaves poor shooters open. They have 2 players flashing in the mid-post and dunker spot to put this help defender in a tough position. The cutter's momentum basically gives the defense no time to react, and here's another finish at the rim. While these cuts were used to compensate for their lack of spacing, they were still encouraging this even when they were trotting out capable shooters. Satoransky drives on the rescreen, and the corner player cuts when he picks up the ball. The offense stalls and have to reset, leading to another drive off the catch by Satoransky and sucks in the help. Love sinks down to cover the corner shooter, but this leaves the cutter open and another easy layup. When the defense overplays on Ingram, JV hits him on the backdoor cut. The defense helps off the low volume shooter in Larry Nance Jr., but see how he cuts to present himself as an option. Ingram didn't need to though, and he finishes himself. Here's a double big lineup again, and the drive gets the defense helping off Ingram. Despite of his all-star status, it's great to see him cutting in to create that dunker spot and mid-post combo. The dish gets another easy basket at the rim. Even if they don't pass, these cuts will position their cutters in rebounding positions, especially when the defense is busy dealing with a bruiser in JV. This is one reason why they ranked 3rd in the league in offensive rebounds per game last year. In Zion's last full season, these are the 2 areas that Zion excelled in. He had the 2nd most cut possessions, and no one else can match his volume and efficiency. He ranked 9th in putback possessions, and only Jokic exceeds his efficiency and volume. When you also consider how much time he was playing next to a non-shooter in Steven Adams, these numbers could be even better with more shooting around him. It's easy to see him being the cutter on these possessions, and making timely cuts from the weak side when his defender disrespects his shooting. The spacing was off on this drag screen, so the timing of the cut wasn't great, but just cutting through to the back of the defense caused some confusion. The ball finds Zion deep in the post, and there's no stopping him this close to the basket. On the CJ drive after the rescreen, the defense is zoning up the weak side. CJ decides to go with the floater before the cutter could present himself as an option. No matter though, because the cut directly leads to the putback. What Zion brings is even more creation if the cut timing or floor spacing was off. The Graham JV pick and roll sucks in 4 defenders in the paint because they don't respect their weak side shooting. Even on this cut, the defense is in great position, but with Zion's athletic ability, he's able to power through the rim. Again, not the best spacing and timing here, and the ball hits the cutter a little too early. Zion can put the ball on the floor and attack the basket with ease. If the defense forces a skip pass early, it means their weak side players will need to create with the ball more. Again, with Zion here, that won't be a problem when he gets a running head start. The problem with replacing shooting with cuts is that everyone's gotta be precise or else the offense will bog down quite easily. CJ hits JV on the short roll, but the help defense is already ready for it. Jones presents himself as a cutter, but the pass was just a bit too high and they turn it over. Here's a sideline pick and roll with CJ 1 pass away. You can see that CJ's hesitant to cut because that's usually reserved for Jones and Hayes, who are both in that same corner. He cuts in eventually, but is met by 2 defenders, leaving only a kick out to the corner as the only option. The defense is probably satisfied with his shot. This usually results in a lot of mid-range jumpers, which isn't ideal. When you have both CJ and Ingram creating your offense, these become pretty good shots when you look at their success rates. When CJ rejects the handoff, the Pelicans find themselves on the CJ mismatch. A drive sucks in multiple help defenders, but the paint is pretty much clogged up for any cuts. It doesn't matter here, since they got CJ to bail them out. A sideline pick and roll gets Ingram driving middle. Hayes prepares the cut, and he can either cut to the left or the right. Picking right would be the better option considering the open area, but it's not an option here because it'll eliminate any chance for Ingram to get in the paint. He's forced to cut to the left with a below average shooter in the corner, so no openings here. Both weak side defenders happily sags off and clogs up the paint, and Ingram has to settle but nails the midi J. While the Pelicans have a game plan to compensate for the lack of spacing, this brings up another question: how far can they go without it? Among the last 5 championship teams, only the Lakers were similar in terms of the 3-point attempts and percentages. Even then, the Lakers bumped up their numbers in the playoffs. The same can't be said for the Pelicans in the 2022 playoffs. 6 games is a small sample size, but they took even less threes in that series. The Bulls were known for their mid-range attack this past year, and even they put up 29 attempts. Zion is going to get his fair share of on-ball creation as well, but this is how I think he'll do off the ball playing besides CJ, Ingram, and JV. It will be interesting to see how the Pelicans will turn out next year, especially with a slimmed down version of Zion. I really like how they compensate their lack of spacing with cuts, when you consider their lack of knockdown shooters and playing to the roster's strength. In the modern game, spacing seems to directly correlate with the success in the playoffs, but who knows, maybe the Pelicans can buck that trend. Anyways, that's it from me, and I'll see you guys next time.